It's the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast, and we are live.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast.
I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry Symeou.
Hello and welcome back to another live edition of the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast, brought to you by 90 Min. As ever, I'm your host, Harry Symeou. And on this edition, we're going to be discussing whether or not Arsenal have improved in recent months. Now, I think we can all agree that the start of the season didn't go as we'd have wanted it to go. We can all agree that we fallen way behind the pack in terms of our hopes of finishing in the top four. And we can all agree that our hopes of finishing in the top four are pretty much gone. There's no getting away from that. The season so far has brought much disappointment, much frustration, much anger. There is, of course, the potential of turning it into a successful season if Arsenal can go on and claim Europa League victory. You know, that would get us back into the UEFA Champions League, back in the big time, which is ultimately our goal. I wanted to go into this off the back of reading a really good piece on The Athletic this morning, in which they kind of broke down a lot of the stats, a lot of the facts, looked at some of the XG, some of the other bits and pieces in terms of the data that is obviously around in football at the moment. And, you know, a lot of people talk about the data and they say, well, the data is irrelevant. You know, the league position doesn't lie and the data paints a false picture. Actually, I think it's quite naive to dismiss the data that is available now. If it wasn't useful, clubs wouldn't spend absolute shitloads of money in making sure that they are up to speed in that department. If it wasn't useful, scouts wouldn't use it, coaches wouldn't use it. There is something in it. Bookies use it. You know, I've been doing a lot of work in the kind of betting world in the last 6 months or so, and I've learned a lot about how odds are made, you know, or how odds are compiled, how tipsters use these stats, use these facts and use this data to come to the best possible conclusions. So to dismiss the sort of the value of the data completely, I think is a bit naive and a bit silly. But obviously that's not to take away from the eye test, right? And the eye test is ultimately what most people will make their judgments based upon. You know, are you seeing it with your own eyes? Are you seeing an improvement in this Arsenal side? And I think that of late, there has been an improvement in our performances. Is it enough of an improvement? That's probably a good debate. Some would say yes, given where we were when Mikel took over, given the problems that he's had to deal with. Others will say no. And I think that that is a really, really interesting debate and one that should be had by all means. But I wanted to highlight some of these points, some of these facts, some of these stats, and we can kind of discuss them and get you guys' thoughts in the live comment section as well. I can see there are people in the chat already that don't want to hear it, that don't want to discuss the fact that there may be some improvement from this Arsenal side. I can see Ricardo in the chat saying, what a joke. Mate, you don't have to watch it. You don't have to listen to it. Maybe, you will agree, maybe you will disagree. That's absolutely fine. You're entitled to do that. All I'm saying is when you look at these stats, when you look at this data, when you look at these facts, there is an argument that says that Arsenal are improving, albeit slowly, but there is an improvement. And I'm going to pick out some of these facts and stats from the Athletics article. Now, I can't share the screen with you, unfortunately, for those of you watching on YouTube, because the Athletics content is behind a paywall. And that will result in my thing being demonetized. So not going to do that, but I will talk you through it. So we're going to start off by looking at the Premier League attacks under the microscope. That's what they've called it. And they've worked it out. You know, Arsenal's current XG at the moment, and obviously XG is based on chances and things like that. That's how they come to your expected goals. So that's the number of goals you're expected to score in a game of football. And at present, Arsenal's XG in the Premier League is 1.27 per game. Right, to put that into context, Arsenal are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, ninth in the league for that. Right, it's not good enough. Obviously, a club like Arsenal on a metric like that, we want to be, right at the very top. We want to be competing with the best sides, but we're ninth on that for the time being. And to put that into context, as I said, Tottenham are slightly ahead of us. 1.28 is their XG, as is 1.27. Chelsea's 1.29. Man United 1.37. Villa, Leeds and West Ham are third, fourth and fifth with 1.43 and 1.44. Liverpool 1.59 in second, and Manchester City are first with 1.64. So there's 0.4 basically of a goal between Arsenal and Manchester City, less than 0.4, 3 point something between Arsenal and Manchester City in terms of the XG. But here is the key point. When you compare the goals to the XG, right, Arsenal are achieving below their XG by 0.16, right? So Arsenal are not hitting their XG. Their expected goals is 1.27 per game. But over the course of the season, we're below that. So Arsenal have scored less goals than the stats suggest they should. Manchester City at the top of the table has scored more goals than their XG says. They've scored an average of 1.86 goals, but their XG is only 1.64. Arsenal scoring 1.11, but our XG is 1.27. So we're underperforming in that department. And that backs up a lot of what people have been saying in recent times. Arsenal are missing opportunities. Arsenal are not taking chances when they're coming their way. And off the back of that, the results are suffering. And you can see that. It's as clear as day. Moving on to the defensive stuff, and you're looking at the Premier League defenses under the microscope. Arsenal faring a little bit better in this. We are second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth in this standings. So you can see Arsenal around about mid-table when it comes to attack and defence. But this one is a little bit more misleading, I think, because the XG is based on obviously the chances that your opponents create, the chances you give up, the positions from which they're taking shots, etc. So much goes into that. But Arsenal, who are expected to concede, 1.12 goals per game, that's our XG. We're conceding 1. So there's only 0.12 of a difference between what we're expected to concede and what we're actually conceding. And we need to improve on that. And that, obviously, that stat is heavily weighted by the fact that we are not conceding anywhere near as many chances as we were. But when we are going into games, we're making individual errors and we're essentially giving up goals that we shouldn't be. And if you take away those individual mistakes and if you take away those errors and look at this again, it would look very different. And Arsenal, when you consider that they for years have been a shambles defensively, are only expected to concede just over a goal a game based on the XG. And most of those goals have come off the back of individual mistakes. You can kind of understand and see where we're at. So I'm not saying that, we're majorly improving or that we've improved a long way. I'm just saying that there is some progress there, but it is albeit slowly. Yannick Mack in the chat says we're 8th defensively. I thought we were 3rd the way Arteta's ins were going in. No, I'm talking about the XG, mate. I'm not talking about the number of goals that we've conceded. It's a completely different thing. XG is the number of goals you are expected to concede based on a number of factors. Yeah. The number of goals that you concede, though, is a different stat to that. This is based on the way we're playing, the number of chances we're giving up. What do the XG stats tell us? Arsenal should be conceding per game. That's what I'm talking about, right? I'm not talking about the number of goals in the league. That's a different stat. So don't get the two confused because it's not the same thing. And I go on to kind of bring to your attention the Athletics kind of summary of where Arsenal are at the moment. And obviously this article went out this morning. Arsenal's current position at the time of recording this is 10th. Their predicted position for us is 9th. because of all the things I've mentioned. We're not converting chances. We're giving away individual mistakes. VAR certainly hasn't helped, and VAR isn't taken into consideration when working all this out as well. And I would argue that we'd probably have another 9 points in the Premier League had it not been for VAR. And that 9 points would be really significant in a season like this one. And would be 9 points puts us in the top 4, basically, or in the race for it at least. So, that's had a huge impact as well. There are a number of things that have impacted Arsenal's season. And as Manny Zander points out in the chat, I believe we've improved defensively. Just need to cut out individual errors. You cut out those individual errors and it's a very different ball game. And ultimately, those individual errors are down to the players. The players are the ones responsible for that. Mikel Arteta's system, his structure, his team selections has led to us conceding fewer opportunities, has led to us, at least in the last few months, starting to create again. I know that prior to that, there were question marks around that, and rightly so, because we weren't doing enough in that area. But that has improved of late. And I'll go on to kind of share with you guys the Athletic summary. They say it took a while to get going, but Arsenal in 2021 have slowly started to improve. And there are now clearer signs of what Mikel Arteta wants his team to look like in the long term. And that I completely agree with. We've seen a system implemented. That system is being continued from week to week. Yes, the personnel was changing. Rotation obviously is necessary at this point. But we are starting to see a bit more of a blueprint, and we're starting to get a bit more of an understanding about what it is that Mikel Arteta wants to see from his team, what the end goal is. I continue on. They talk about the creative boost from Emile Smith-Rowe, Bukayo Saka and Martin Odegaard. That's been backed up by the numbers, because since the turn of the year, the XG trend has spiked. So again, means nothing if you don't convert the chances, of course, but you can take some encouragement from the fact that the XG trend is on the way up, and that is because Arsenal are creating more opportunities. Therefore, according to the XG, according to the statisticians, in theory, although it's not happening at the moment, in theory, Arsenal are creating more chances and Arsenal should be scoring more goals. Moving on, they talk about the fact that, Arsenal have given away freebies to the opposition, and they named Granit Xhaka in that. But they say that putting that to the side, if we don't give away the freebies, there's every reason that the Gunners will finish this season strong. Is there any chance that they could sneak into the top 4? According to the stats performs model, there's a 2.2% chance that Arsenal come into the top 4. So that's pretty much zilch, right? Arsenal are not going to make the top 4, but I don't think we needed the stats to tell us that. I think we all, we all understand that. We all realize that, the top 4 feels unreachable at the moment. And that's off the back of, it's not off the back of drawing at Burnley the other day. It's because there's been a constant inconsistency throughout this season. You talk about, the last couple of league games, the Leicester-Burnley game. And I spoke about this on the post-match podcast, and I do genuinely believe this. Leicester City, obviously top 4 contenders. Arsenal go and draw at Leicester. Everybody's overjoyed and says we've done well and we've gone away from home and we've managed to compete and we've come away with a good point. And then we go and win at Burnley and everybody's delighted that we've gone and won at Burnley. But ultimately, with the results being the other way round, we still managed to get 4 points out of those 2 games. And the point I'm trying to say is sometimes it's about perception. Sometimes it's the way you look at things. Sometimes it's the way you package something. At the end of the day, 4 points from Leicester away and Burnley away is not an embarrassing return by any stretch of the imagination. But it's a combination of things that have led to it being looked at in that way. A, our current league position is just not good enough. So obviously we need more points than we would normally need. And so there's a desperation in the fan base to see Arsenal pick up those points and quickly. But ultimately, as I keep saying, you go and draw at Leicester and you go and win at Burnley and everybody's talking about Arsenal being on the right track again. But ultimately, the points return is the same. And I always say this, you should look at a group of games when deciding how many points you want from it, because there are variables in football that can very, very quickly change the landscape of a football match. Against Burnley at the weekend, there was, of course, the the decision that we didn't get. The fact that we should have had a penalty late on. There was the individual error from Granit Xhaka. There was an individual error at Aston Villa. There was an individual error from Dani Ceballos in the Benfica game. Those individual errors, you can't legislate for those, right? As a manager, you can spend the whole week preparing for the game, but you can't legislate for that kind of thing, and that's the issue here. Some of you said in the chat, is the title of this video a wind up? No, it's not. And if you don't want to watch it, if you don't want to listen to it, it's no problem. It's no skin off my nose, honestly. If you want to listen to an alternative point of view, I enjoy listening to alternative point of views, because often I sit there and I go, don't agree with your overall view, but that was a good point, or that was a good point. If you don't want to listen, that's absolutely fine. And as Wesbird says in the chat, look, just kind of backing up the point, we would have taken a point away to Leicester before the start of the season. So 4 points from the last 2 games isn't a bad return. Also, 18 months ago, we'd have lost both games. Yeah, and it's the point here is that it's the way that it's being packaged up. It's the way that it's almost being sold to people. That 4 point return is not good enough. That's where we are, guys. That's where we are. Like, what do people expect? Like, do people expect Arsenal to go on this run whereby they win 8, 9, 10 games in the Premier League on the trot? Because that's not going to happen, because simply this team are not good enough. They're just not good enough. And the sooner people realize that and understand that, I'm not saying accept it, but the sooner you understand it, the sooner you'll be able to watch Arsenal not get as irate and as wound up and as disappointed by certain results, because you'll understand that that's where we are. And and look, ultimately we watch football because we love football and we want to enjoy it. And I think when your expectations are basically up in the clouds, but your team is is down on their arse, then it's very difficult to ever be happy, to ever be pleased, isn't it? Let's come on to some of your comments. And let me just finish off before I move on. I talked about the 2.2% chance, according to Stats Perform, of Arsenal finishing in the top 4. Their actual odds of getting into the top 4 with the bookmakers are around about 35-1 now, which is massive. Can't see it happening, so I wouldn't advise you to waste your money. But that tells you the story, doesn't it? Bookies are very rarely wrong. That's why they're in business. Capone says, but Harry, there's having an opinion. Then there's this. How can you say that we've improved, but we finished below what we did last season? How much do you want us to fall? And Harry, I'm not coming at you. No, that's fine, mate. You're entitled to your view as well. No problem. But we might not finish lower than we did last season, right? There's still time for Arsenal to potentially improve on last season's finish. But the thing you got to realize here is that you got to sit and consider what Mikel Arteta's objective would have been at the start of the season when he went into the office or the training ground or wherever, and he sat down with Vinay Venkatesham and he sat down with Edu, and they were drawing up their plans for the season. What do you think that objective would have been? I can tell you that objective would have been to restore Arsenal's UEFA Champions League status. And our league form has been all over the shop. It's been bad. It's been poor. I think there are reasons of our own making that have led to that. But I also think there have been reasons out of our control that have contributed to it as well. Injuries to key players at key times. Bad VAR calls. As I keep saying, Arsenal have another 8-9 points. The table looks very, very different. And I genuinely do believe that we have lost out on that number of points because of bad refereeing calls. And how many times can you make excuses for them? People will hammer VAR and say that it's the concept of VAR that's causing these problems or that's getting things wrong, but it's not. It's the people that are operating it. If you're a referee and you can't be competent, even with the tools that the VAR provides you with, even with countless replays, even with someone in your ear watching for things that you can't necessarily see, and you have the benefit of going over to a screen and looking at the replay and you still get it wrong, the problem is you, right? The replay is just a replay. A replay is just a showing of something that's occurred. It's just a replay. That's all it is. It's down to those who are operating it to get it right. And unfortunately, they haven't this season. And, you know, there's not a single person off the back of that game at Burnley that has said that, you know, that Arsenal shouldn't have had a penalty. So it's inexcusable for me. You know, if everyone can watch that and see that, you know, we're not talking about referees in the heat of the moment anymore who don't have the benefit or the luxury of a replay. We're talking about referees with all the tools available to them to get the decisions, at least most of the time, correct. Sometimes they're subjective. That one was not subjective. You know, the guy's arms out here and he's prevented Nicolas Pepe progressing. So, you know, when you're judging Mikel Arteta, sometimes I would say just back your team. Just back your team. And you know, I used to do it a lot more when I was younger. You know, when I was younger, I wouldn't have it. When Arsenal were beaten or a decision went against us, I wouldn't have it. There was no talking to me. There was no telling me that actually, you know, maybe you haven't got a point here. Maybe there's a middle ground to be found. And I look back and I try and work out and I try and think about what it was that changed for me, that made me a little bit more open to debate when it comes to refereeing decisions. What was it that made me go, you know, actually, I've got to be a little bit fairer on this. When I'm assessing this, I've got to be a little more open to the other side of the argument. And you know what changed? Changed that I was working, or I was starting to do work in this industry. And when I started to do work in this industry, I felt this moral obligation to be fairer, or to try and be as fair as I possibly could. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm an Arsenal fan. I'm an Arsenal fan. And, you know, if something's clear and obvious, you know, like, for example, the handball that Eric Peters was penalised for in that game, where it come off his shoulder and he was subsequently shown a red card, you know, that's obviously wrong, right? That's as clear as day. And so I can look at that and I can go, that's the right call. And there really is no leg to stand on. But then why should I try, you know, regardless of my job as an Arsenal fan, I have no reason to go against my team in a situation like the one involving Pepe and say, oh, you know, maybe it's because of the proximity. No, I've got absolutely no reason to do that. I will back my team now. And I think that, you know, I always did that growing up, and I've always tried to stay away when talking about general football on whatever platform from getting into refereeing calls a lot. But lately, it's been so difficult to do that because the pure incompetence is just on show all the time, week after week after week. I know that people have heard me say over the last few weeks that I actually enjoy watching Serie A more now, and I prefer to watch that in my spare time than watching random Premier League matches. And you know what the reason for that is? Because it hasn't been spoiled by VAR. Are there decisions in Serie A that come up from time to time where people go, not sure about that, I think the VAR maybe got that wrong? Absolutely there are. And there will always be debate in football because there are so many variables, there are so many subjective decisions. But ultimately, we're at a point in the Premier League where that has killed off the league. And I think it's horrible that managers, that players are often ridiculed and turned into villains and lose their jobs and lose their places in the team because of results that are dictated by incompetent officials over and over and over again. I talked a lot earlier about the stats, about the facts, about the XG, about all of that. And I said that the eye test is still the one. It's still the go-to. It's still the first point of call. Well, for me, the eye test says that we are getting better because we are holding the ball more. You know, we are holding possession. We are creating more opportunities with a greater frequency. We are giving away less chances. And, you know, that's the eye test for me. And all that these stats and facts and all of that do is they just back up what I've seen with the eye test. And that's why I think they're powerful here. They're not the be all and end all. They're not the one indicator, but what they do is they help back up what the eye test ultimately tells us. And when I'm talking about Arsenal conceding less chances, when I'm talking about Arsenal creating more chances, and that's what my eyes are telling me, well, actually, that's what the stats are telling me as well. And that's that. Big shout out to Capone, who says, Harry, I don't agree with some of your points, but I'll always be respectful about it. At the end of the day, we're both Arsenal fans. Absolutely. Absolutely, man. And look, I don't do this to try and force my opinions down other people's throats, right? I don't do this because I want every single person who watches or listens to it to agree with me. I do this because I'm sharing my views and my opinions. And up until now, it's the thing has grown, and I enjoy doing it, and I love doing it, and I've been lucky to make a break into a career that I always wanted off the back of it. So I will continue to share my views, and I'll continue to share my opinions, obviously respectfully. I will respect you guys as well, and that's brilliant from Capone, because that's all we want, right, as Arsenal fans, is to be respectful when having a debate. That's all it is, man. We can have different viewpoints. That's absolutely fine. How boring would the world be if everybody agreed on everything? So it's great to have different opinions, different views. Quick reminder, if you haven't already, make sure you smash the like button on the video, whether you agree with me or not. It really, really helps the channel. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you fancy supporting me to bring you guys more content and you want to become a member, then make sure you click the link in the description and check out our membership proposition. It really, really helps. Next bit of members content is dropping tomorrow. So get ready for that. It should have been out a few days ago, but work has just been an absolute, it's been mental. For those of you that don't know, I'll just kind of fill you guys in. Obviously I'm working for VSIN in the United States, bringing you guys live commentary, whilst Nigel Seeley brings live in-play betting of the Premier League games. And we've recently been commissioned to add an additional game to our week roster. So we used to do one a week, the Saturday 5:30 slot, and now we've added some midweek games. And of course, the last two midweek games have been Thursday, which was Liverpool versus Chelsea, and then last night, which was West Ham versus Leeds. So it's been a really busy sort of 4 or 5 days or so, working here, doing this, writing, covering other stories, and then shooting straight to the studio. Yesterday, I started work at 8 o'clock in the morning. I didn't get home from work till 11:30 at night. So it's long old days, and sometimes there will be slight delays in me dropping the members content. So I do apologize for that, but I promise I'll always get it out to you. And the next one will be dropping tomorrow. So also tomorrow, by the way, I'll be joined by a good friend. He's a journalist. He works over at the Sun Sport. He's also Greek, and he's also a massive Olympiacos fan. Grew up in Athens watching them. Konstantinos Lianos, if you remember him from last season, he came on ahead of the Olympiacos game. So he'll be coming on to preview that game with us, and we'll be getting a bit of an update on where they are almost a year on from them dumping us out of the Europa League the last time. So looking forward to speaking to him again. So make sure you tune in for that. It's going to be at midday tomorrow. It'll be live, and of course the podcast will be available shortly after. Big thanks to all of you in the chat for your support and your kind words. Really, really appreciate it. Great stuff. Let's go over to a few more comments. Have you got any questions? Chuck them in. I'd love to take them on. So any questions you got, any thoughts, make sure you get them in the live chat box, and I'll pick them up now. Let's see what we've got here. Matt G says, I've seen people exaggerate the expectations of those who are Arteta out. I've heard people say you want Arteta to win the league in Europa. That's not realistic. I don't think any fan said that. Yeah, I agree. Look, it's been a painful season, right? But football in general has been shit this year. Let's be honest. You know, we talk a lot about how important it was for many of us for it to continue during the pandemic, when, you know, arguably you could have made a case that said it probably shouldn't have continued. It's not essential, is it? It is to some of us that work in the world, but it's not. You know, there are other businesses where people have been unable to operate, been unable to work, and you'd argue that they have been impacted more and probably shouldn't have been. So, you know, football has continued, and I'm obviously I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful for the fact that I've got work and I'm able to, continue bringing you guys coverage of it. But there's no getting away from the fact that this season has been severely impacted, by what's gone on, by the fact that there are no fans, by the fact that, we're playing so many games and that teams are having to rotate more than they would usually. There's no getting away from that. The game has been deeply impacted. And I've not enjoyed this season, not just because Arsenal haven't been good and because our form has been so sketchy and because we've had so many problems, but also because it's been shit in general. Like, I don't have that. You normally, you'd sit down on Sunday and you'd watch the Manchester derby, first and second in the Premier League. I know there's a significant gap between them, but you'd say, packed stadium, packed to the rafters. You look forward to that, watching that and the atmosphere that comes with it. It's all artificial. It's all artificial because there is no atmosphere. A lot of people talk to me about Leeds United. And I always say, yeah, they've been a joy to watch this season since coming into the division. But imagine what they'd be like to watch in a packed Ellen Road where the stadium's going absolutely bonkers when they pull off incredible results. Imagine that away and, in some of the grounds they've gone and won on. Like, it's just, football has been spoiled. And I don't mean that in a selfish way, because I do appreciate that it's not important in the grand scheme of things, but it's not the same. And I've not enjoyed football off the back of that. And I feel like because there is nothing else going on in the world, there is a greater microscope on results. There is a greater microscope on the game when actually the game is not, we've got, our standards are up here, but the game is not there at the minute because of everything that's happening. And we've got to adjust those expectations. I, as I said, been doing a lot of the bet casts over on VSIN and some other bits and pieces. And I've worked really closely with Premier Sports Plays, really good tipsters who have a fantastic service that you can sign up for and you receive tips every week. And obviously they make their clients money. That's why they're in business. And, it's always bet under 2.5 goals, bet under 2.5 goals. Last night, Chelsea, Everton, West Ham, Leeds, all in action. I put an accumulator on both games to end under 2.5 goals, and it came off because that's just the nature of football at the moment. You're looking at a game that is very different, a game that has changed, and a game that just is not the one that we all fell in love with. Let's go back over to the chat. Let's pick up some of your questions, and apologies if I missed some because the chat is constantly updating. Capone says, Harry, would you start Pablo Mari or Gabriel based on current form? I think it's got to be Pablo Mari. Gabriel's looked a little bit iffy for me since he's returned from COVID, and I don't blame him for that. I've had the virus. I know that it can take a little while for you to get back up to speed, let alone if you're trying to compete at the top level. My exercise ranges from the sofa to my bedroom and from my living room to the man cave down here to bring you these podcasts. That's what lockdown's been like. So, I totally appreciate that Gabriel's probably still struggling from that. But I'd go with Pablo Mari based on the current form. Sulak says 99 watching, 37 likes, do more. Yep, agreed. Let's get more likes on the video. It is really, really important and it really does help. Alex McCarthy says, question, audio next season for referees, your views. I think that would go a long way in mending the breakdown in a relationship between the fans and the officials at the moment. Because with anything, your opinion may not change, but I think you're more open to having your opinion changed or open to accepting a different opinion when there's an explanation in place. And I think that the fact that there is no explanation and these calls seem to be made just, almost in secret, with a real lack of transparency, I think that's contributed to fans getting angry and frustrated and disappointed with the officials. So for me, I think that audio would go a long way in helping. Yeah, because even if I don't agree with a decision, if I can understand the rationale behind it, I'll probably be more accepting of it. Adam Chisholm says, how far do you think we'll go under KSE's ownership, if anywhere? I think we'll get back into the Champions League. But it's difficult to see us going beyond that. And the thing is that people will have their criticisms of KSE, and rightly so. You know, there are a lot of things you can point at KSE for and say, you know, you haven't always shown the football side, or you haven't always prioritized the football side. But I think it is very, very difficult now to compete with Manchester City, to compete with, you know, Chelsea financially, to compete with Manchester United, who are just a far bigger football club than, you know, than everybody else. Liverpool did it. You know, Liverpool managed to get their act together under Jurgen Klopp, did some really good recruitment. But how long did it last? You know, one season where they ran Manchester City very close and were probably unlucky not to win it. And then one season where they won it. But beyond that, then look at them this season. You know, unless you're going to keep spending and keep refreshing and keep adding and keep boosting to your squad like Manchester City do. And, you know, with Manchester City, it's not 5 or 6 players every summer. It could be 2 or 3, but 2 or 3 players of the highest caliber. And that's why Pep Guardiola over the years has built a very strong squad. And that's why they've dominated the Premier League this season. Again, because at a time where fatigue has been a massive issue, where rotation has been necessary for every single manager across the board, Manchester City have had the quality to be able to rotate and it not impact on their overall level. So that's the difference. KSE are never going to pump in that kind of money. They never have. They never will. There's no evidence looking at their other sports franchises across the world that they would change that approach. But does someone else coming in automatically mean we're going to become Premier League champions again? It doesn't. There's a lot of talk about Dangote, the Nigerian guy, being linked with obviously potentially coming in. For me, he's all talk. You know, until I see him come to the club and table a bid, or until, you know, we hear of an official, you know, approach, then it's all talk for me. You know, he's been talking about it for 7-8 years, you know, the richest man in the world, richest man in Africa, etc., etc. He's going to come and buy Arsenal Football Club. What are you waiting for then, mate? Because I guarantee you this, if you'd offered Stan Kroenke over what the market rate is for the Arsenal Football Club, particularly during a pandemic, I think he would, I think he'd jump at the chance. But yeah, interesting question. Wes Bird says, being realistic, what's your target this season and what are you hoping for the summer and going into next season? So realistically, my target is we got to do our best to win the Europa League. It's as simple as that. You know, the Premier League position needs to improve. Of course it does. But if you told me we were going to stay in 10th, but had a 10% greater chance of winning the Europa League, I'd go with the Europa League, because ultimately our goal for the campaign, as I keep on saying, would have been to qualify for the UEFA Champions League. And we can't do that via the league. It's the Athletic pointed out, there's a 2.2% chance of that happening. It's not very high. So I'd be placing all my eggs in the Europa League basket right now. That's my expectation. That's my target. Realistically, though, you know, am I going to throw that back in Mikel Arteta's face if Arsenal, for example, were eliminated in the semi-finals, or, you know, were eliminated by a team, for example, like Manchester United, who are clearly better than us this season? No, probably not, because you have to be, you know, you can go out of a competition, but how did you go out of the competition, I think, is what upsets people and what really, you know, people struggle with. And you look at that FA Cup exit earlier on in the season to Southampton, I think a lot of people took offence to that, more so because of the way we went out rather than the fact that we were out, because ultimately, as I kept saying at the time, the FA Cup does not offer us a route back to where we want to be. It's a trophy, it's a piece of silverware, it's brilliant, but it isn't gonna fill the bank account up with Champions League revenue. So, you know, that's where I'm at. That's what I want. In terms of next season, I think we have to be challenging for the top 4. There's no doubt about it. I've said it time and time again. I'm willing to give Mikel Arteta a bit of a bye this season, but I will not stand for it next season, because it would have been too long. At a club like Arsenal, you need to get results. You can allow the club the club can kind of relieve the pressure off of your back as the boss for 18 months, 24 months. But after that, it becomes difficult, you know, and the pressure of the fans. And when the fans return to the stadium as well, you'll see a lot more of that heat sort of being applied on Mikel Arteta and his kind of staff and the players as well if things do not improve. So I want to see a decent summer. I acknowledge that if we don't qualify for Europe especially, it's going to be a difficult summer financially. But I think Arsenal, if they can show the kind of creativity in the transfer market that's seen them land Gabriel when a lot of other clubs wanted them, that's seen them land Thomas Partey, and that's seen them bring Martin Odegaard in on a short-term deal, but one that is of benefit to us, then I'll be okay with that. Omar says, do you think we showed enough against Benfica to give you confidence for Thursday's game? For me, what I want to see is the players and the manager have learned from last season's defeat. It's difficult. The Benfica game was a difficult one to call judgment on, because often in cup ties, you can get bogged down by the performance, but ultimately what matters is getting over the line. And Arsenal did get over the line against Benfica in the end. What was frustrating about the Benfica tie was that we gifted them opportunities. Other than us gifting them, they didn't do a great deal. So, Olympiacos obviously flying high in Greece, but the standard of that league is not particularly amazing. We'll get more insight from Konstantinos tomorrow, as I said. So stay tuned for that one. Midday tomorrow we'll be live and I'll be talking to him about where Olympiacos are. What I will say about them, though, is that Pedro Martins is a very tactically astute manager. He proved that last season. He's still got some really decent players there. Some of the most notable ones will be obviously Socrates, former Arsenal man, will, I'm sure, no doubt, be able to provide his coach with some insight as to what Arsenal may do and how Arsenal may want to play, and maybe some of Mikel Arteta's principles, which obviously helps Olympiacos' cause. But then, players like Jan and Villa are in the team. Remember him? How many times have we linked with him over the years? Central midfielder, Valbuena's in the side, getting on a little bit, but still a very technically gifted footballer. People like Al Arabi up front. He's a dangerous striker. And they do have players, and they do have a chance to, they do have the capability to cause us problems. So we've got to be at our best, not do anything stupid. Fingers crossed we can progress. Let's pick out another few questions. This one comes from Said Abdullah. Do you think Martinelli will have a chance this season? Personally, I don't see it. It's a tough one, this, because there's been a lot of debate around this, hasn't there? Around whether Gabriel Martinelli is someone that Mikel Arteta just simply doesn't fancy at the moment. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, and I'm putting it down to the players' issues with fitness, to the fact that he has returned from a really long-term injury, an injury that has the potential to really stifle one's career. A lot of people have been raising the question in recent weeks, but I think it's been difficult for Mikel because Pepe has hit form, because Willian has been better. And when they're playing well, what justification is there to bring Martinelli, who has done very little this season, obviously largely because he was injured, but what justification is there to overlook an informed Pepe or an informed Willian to play Gabriel Martinelli? When you're looking at the results now, you need the results now. I know some people will make the counter argument but Martinelli is our future and Willian isn't, so we should be prioritizing his development. But does a manager at this level have time all the time to prioritize development of individuals, or does he have to think about the team and put the team first? So I'm not sure he'll get much game time between now and the end of the season, but I didn't think that would be the case when he returned anyway. My view on it was very much that the remainder of the season would be about Gabriel Martinelli getting up to speed, getting fit, and making sure there is no recurrence of that injury that kept him out for the best part of 6 months. Top Techers says, Harry, putting finances aside for a moment, do you think a season out of Europe next season would actually be beneficial for the team and Arteta to get his philosophy across properly? Yeah, I do. I think one of the things that is really difficult when you're competing on so many different fronts is that the lack of actual training time in between games. So, you might play, say, for example, Arsenal play on a Sunday. You're going to have Monday. Some of that's going to be recovery, reviewing the game from the weekend. And then you've got Tuesday, full training, I guess. Wednesday, in the case of a Europa League game, you might have to travel somewhere in the afternoon. So you only get half of Wednesday, maybe, if that. And then you're playing a game, and then the Friday's about recovery and reviewing, and then the Saturday comes, and you've got a game again on the Sunday. So it's very difficult to actually improve things and to change things. And it's one of the reasons that I've given Mikel Arteta a lot more leeway than I gave to Unai Emery, because I think that Unai Emery, obviously had to contend with the Europa League, and he had to, embed his own philosophies, but ultimately he was a far more experienced coach and would have experienced campaigns like this in the past, and would have maybe understood a little bit more about how it is that you best make use of your time. Maybe would have had a schedule in place that is a little bit more effective off the back of that. So I feel like Mikel Arteta has not only come in as a rookie, not only had to contend with off the field problems, but also the nature of the campaign. And this campaign, let's have it right, is like no other. There's never been a campaign like this where the games are so crammed together. We've heard talk about the scheduling before, and we've heard about how it's too difficult and too hard on the British teams. But this time around, we're seeing it 10 times worse because of everything that's going on. And I get why it has to be like that, but I just think that you shouldn't dismiss that point when assessing where Arsenal are at. Eli M says, hi Harry, any thoughts on Ozil's blistering start in Turkey? Yeah, he's not been good at all. I guess the defense of Ozil would be that he hasn't played football for God knows how many months. I don't think he played for 9 months prior to going over there. He's picked up an injury now, Mr. Ozil. I think he's going to be out for a few more weeks. So but look, I know the anti-Ozil brigade will use that as a stick to beat him with, and will say, look, we let him go and he's not even doing anything, so we were right to do that and all that. And that's fine. Look, I'm over the Ozil thing. It's done. It was done and dusted in January. But how can you expect an athlete who's been out of the picture, who hasn't competed at the top level for the best part of 9 months, to then hit the ground running instantly? Difficult. Let's see what else we've got. I'm going to pick out 1 or 2 more questions. Inter Yanaz says, Harry, have you ever tried that Camden beer at the ground? Thoughts? Camden Hills? No, I haven't. I'm not a massive beer drinker when I go to football matches. I don't mind meeting up with some mates or whatever and having a drink prior to the game or post the game. But for me, this may be a little bit too crude for the podcast. Maybe you don't want to know this, but the idea of drinking loads and loads of beer and then going into a football stadium, and the potential of potentially having to run to the gents during the game, is not the one for me. When I get there, I go and do what I got to do before the game. I get in my seat, I get settled, and I enjoy the game, and I'm fully focused on the game. And I don't want any distractions. I also don't want to watch games drunk, which a lot of people do, and you can tell they do because they're next to me or in my sort of block, and you can hear them talking absolute bollocks because they have been on the beers from 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. So honestly, I don't really drink at football matches. Never have. I don't mind afterwards, but for me, it's all about the football. And I don't think I can really experience the football and really take in the football if I drink. Obviously 1 beer isn't going to get you drunk. So I'm not saying I've never had 1 or 2 before a game. But I've not tried Camden Hells, although I did buy some the other day because I came across it in a supermarket. I came across a few beers actually that you don't normally find in the supermarket that I quite like. So I picked up a few, and I'll be indulging in those, I'm sure, over the weekend. So I'll let you know how it is, mate. Let's see what else we've got. I'm going to pick out 1 more question. Here we go. I'm going to take this one from Harry. He says, are you excited to go back to the Emirates? I'm worried how the atmosphere will be if we finish the season poorly and then follow it with an underwhelming summer window. Look, there are concerns about the atmosphere, but I think at the beginning, when we first return, I think that fans will be so just overjoyed and delighted to be there and enjoying the experience. I think that they'll just be so buzzing to be back that the atmosphere will naturally be good. For me, it's a massive part of my life. It's a massive part of my routine. I found it really difficult not being able to go to games. I found it's as silly as this might sound. It, you know, mental health wise, it does impact you when you're living, working, and partaking in your hobbies all in the same place. It does get a bit weird. I'm not someone who you'd ever catch at home, or you'd catch at home as often as you should maybe prior to the lockdown, and so it's really impacted me. And for me to go back, I think is great, and I can't wait for that day. I honestly cannot wait, and I'm really excited about it. But I think there will be an enthusiasm to go back, and when that enthusiasm, and I think that enthusiasm will have a positive impact on the atmosphere, at least for a little while. But obviously that will fade, and you know, as I said earlier on, there will be growing pressure and increased pressure on Mikel Arteta if things do not improve more. And you know, that's the way football goes, isn't it? It's the way football goes. Let me just take this last comment, and I'm going to leave it there because I've got a dash. But Crazy Old World says, people are so eager to have their questions asked. They ask obvious questions. Now they're talking about beer. Pointless talk. We went from winning titles to asking questions about beer. This club is done. There's nothing wrong with having a bit of a light-hearted conversation when things aren't going right for your football club. It doesn't always have to be doom and gloom. If that's what people want to ask, that's what they can ask, and I'll happily answer it. The fact that you have taken a question about beer so seriously that you've felt the need to write a comment about it, and you've somehow found the correlation between the club underperforming on the pitch and somebody asking me a question about whether I enjoy a particular beer is quite weird, if I'm honest. And I wonder, you know, I just, it's madness. I mean, I wonder what your day must be like. I mean, haven't you got anything better to do than complain about people asking about beer? It's absolute nonsense, man. I don't understand why people want to dig out each other's questions. You can all ask questions. If you ask a question, I'll answer it. If I see it, I'll answer it. But let's not make a massive deal about people asking questions about a beer. I mean, it's not even an issue. It's a non-issue. It's a good question. I enjoyed answering it. And if you don't like it, then you know where you can go. I love this from Harry. Searches for picture of Xhaka drinking beer. Brilliant stuff. Right, we're going to leave it there. That brings me to the end of this live edition of the podcast. I'll be back later on with another stream. And until then, take care of yourselves and stay safe. All the best. Cheers.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast.
I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry Symeou.